Whoa, what is going on, football fans? Back at it with another New York Giants video. And in this video, we're going to talk about a few things. The gist of the video is going to obviously be about the press conference today from Joe Schoen. Rather than pull up some quotes, I'm just going to play the video. It's about 17 minutes in length, so this is going to be a longer video, and I'm going to react to some of the things in which he said. And the gist of it, as you would expect, the majority of it was going to be about Saquon Barkley and Daniel Jones, being that they're the two faces of the franchise. They're both free agents. The tag deadline is March 7th. But I thought Joe Schoen went pretty in depth with the discussion regarding Barkley, regarding Jones, regarding the negative effect that the franchise tag may have. So I thought he went pretty in depth in terms of the way that he's thinking and the way that he wants this to go. But at the same time, as I've said all along, as we've heard all along, he's going to be, he's going to have a walkaway price. He's not going to overcommit to any player on this team for more than he thinks that he should, for more than, what they're worth. But I wanted to go into everything in which he talked about. I watched like the first 10 minutes while I was at work, listened to it. It's about 17 minutes in length, so I didn't even get to hear the whole thing quite yet. So you'll see me reacting at least to probably the last 6 or 7 minutes of it for the first time. And I'll go over the entirety of it. So this will definitely be a longer video. Before we get into that part of it, we'll talk about I think the obvious news was just a matter of when, and it's just a matter of what they're going to decide to do. But it's now official. The New York Giants have moved on from Kenny Golladay. This coming out from Art Stapleton earlier today. Giants will release Kenny Golladay. There's no surprise in that. And doing it on the first day of the league year rather than post June 1st, they'll gain $6.7 million in space for 2023, and Golladay will be off the books in 2024. Now, what I'll say to that is Joe Schoen later went on to talk about it. I think when he was up with the one-on-one with Paul Dottino, I'm not going to pull that up. You can find that on the Giants website. And several people on Twitter also talked about that just because it's coming out that he's cutting him today doesn't necessarily mean that he's going to decide to do it before June 1st. I guess he still has the option, even though they're announcing they're going to be moving off of him, of doing the official cut after June 1st to give the New York Giants, if he elects to go that route, more cap space for the 2023 season. So it'll be interesting to see how he goes about doing it. My guess would be if he is forced to franchise tag Daniel Jones, he may do it post June 1st to give himself more room to be able to build this roster this year and maybe help pay for the draft class. But at the same time, you could argue that he may say to himself, well, it may be more valuable to have the money up front during free agency and not be able to wait till June 1st if he's got to commit $32 million, at least initially, to Daniel Jones on the franchise tag. So that may have something to do with his decision on whether or not he decides to cut Kenny Golladay before June 1st or after June 1st. Ideally, yeah, you would like to cut him this year so you got as much cap space as possible for next year. But at the same time, you could argue, due to the fact that the cap goes up, saving saving an extra 6.7 this year is more valuable than putting that money back towards next year when the cap is going to go up. So 6.7 next year isn't worth quite as much as it would be this year. So it'll be an interesting decision for Joe Schoen to make regarding the salary cap. And regarding the decision with Kenny Golladay. But rest assured, if you were nervous at all, I was not. I don't think many Giants fans were. Kenny Golladay will not be back. The Giants will be saving at least $6.7 million on this year's cap, and it'll depend on when they decide to do it. If they could save another 6.7, and then they, add a little bit more money to next year's cap, that'll go against it with the dead cap hit. Regardless, Kenny Golladay in the end made out like a bandit. 4 years, $72 million, of which he saw the majority of that money. Congratulations, Kenny. You had the heist of a lifetime. I don't want to really rag on Golladay because I don't think he's a bad guy. I think he bought into the team first mentality last year, showed a lot of pride, did whatever he could to try to help the football team. It just didn't work out. And I wish him nothing but the best wherever he goes. But obviously, it was one of Dave Gettleman's parting gifts and arguably his worst move as the New York Giants general manager as everything turned out. We were all really excited when we signed Golladay because we thought he was going to be that number one option that Daniel Jones desperately needed. It turned out he could not beat out David Sills in training camp. And it ended up being, one of the worst free agent signings in franchise history. I mean, when you really look at it, the guy had one touchdown, and it was in a meaningless game last year when the New York Giants already clinched the playoffs during his tenure with the New York Giants. So we move on, and hopefully the Giants could find the wide receiver of the future for this football team because we need it, whether it's going to be in free agency, whether it's going to be in the draft. We all know that that's something that Daniel Jones is certainly going to need going forward, which is going to turn me to the Joe Schoen press conference. This is going to be a long reaction. It's a 17-minute video. I'm going to play it. I'll stop it here and there when I think he brings up a point that I want to talk about, but we'll just listen to it to what Joe Schoen had to say regarding, the offseason, regarding where the New York Giants currently are. Of course, right now he's at the combine. If you guys are not aware, that just started. I think the players just reported. I think they start doing the drills in about 2 or 3 days. So you'll definitely start to get a little bit more of a feel for the draft this year. Things will start to, I guess, heat up a little bit in terms of these prospects. You'll start to see a lot more mock drafts come out post combine when these guys really impress in their shorts. But let's talk about what Joe Schoen had to say. I'm going to play this. Going to mute the mic, and hopefully this comes through. I'll definitely check it before I post it on YouTube. But we're going to play it here. I'll mute the mic as I listen.
We've been in constant contact with his agents. We had productive conversations yesterday. We have some more scheduled today, so we'll continue to communicate with them. Some of it's was in person and then over the phone, and then yesterday was in person, and it'll be in person again today. So yeah, we'll continue to hammer out, try to get closer to getting something done, hopefully.
Is there work operations dealing with the quarterback, the running back, the star running back?
Not right now. We've had productive conversations with both the representatives, Saquon going all the way back to November, and we'll continue to do so. But there's not priority on one or the other.
You don't have to be Daniel Jones thing done before you know what you're doing.
No, not necessarily. That was something personal that Daniel wanted to do. Again, I didn't really get into it, but we had never had any conversations with CAA. We didn't. They have no idea what value we thought. I have no idea what they would ask. Like, that was totally separate. We have a great relationship with CAA, great relationship with Athletes First. We had just never even embarked on any type of negotiations, numbers, anything. That was just something, Daniel decided to do on his own. And then once, there was a separation, then, we started talking with Athletes First, once that had been done.
All right, so I'm going to start with that. I thought that was interesting. And of course, there's been like a lot of speculation regarding what and why Daniel Jones switched agencies. And I guess we're never going to get the full story. I mean, you'll probably hear tidbits here and there. Most people are going to side with the fact that he probably didn't feel like he was getting, they were going to be able to get him as much money as he possibly could. And it makes sense due to the fact that he's a free agent and he's trying to make as much money as he possibly can. But what I thought was interesting there that Joe Schoen said was the fact that they never even negotiated, like, even the beginnings of a contract. If that's accurate, that makes you think a little bit, right? Because and I think this had as much to do, or at least it seems or feels like it had as much to do with Daniel Jones's representation as the Giants themselves. That they didn't even come forth and start talking to the New York Giants, right? We heard stories about Julian Love and Saquon Barkley talked during the bye week, and we heard that them and Daniel Jones did not talk. And I think a lot of people assumed that was more so on the Giants and that they didn't want Jones back. I kind of get the feeling that it was more so on Daniel Jones's ex-agency, not making the effort to try to contact the Giants. My guess would be it was a strategical approach. Maybe they were trying to remain distant to try to up their value, not to appear desperate. Play out the season. They know quarterbacks make a lot of money, especially if they can make the playoffs. Who knows? I'm sure they had their strategy behind it. But I think in the end, at least it seems like Daniel Jones didn't like the approach that they took, and probably, is why they moved off. So the fact that they didn't even begin contract negotiations, at least according to Joe Schoen there in that little tidbit, I don't even know if it was about money at that point, right? Because they didn't even, if he's what he is saying is accurate, they didn't even start talking about the dollars and cents. So just thought that was interesting. But let's keep going.
Yeah, I would say cautiously optimistic. I mean, it's again, you have to go through hard times before you come out the other end on better times with negotiations. So we're trying to work through it. Obviously we'd like to have them both back. They know how we feel about both of them, and again, we're still working through it. There is, but it's got to be right for both parties. I mean, it's there's, again, I say it all the time with you guys, if then scenarios, we're going through those. So if it gets out of hand and it's out of our comfort zone, we have the tag, we can only tag one player. We'll use that. And if somebody's got to walk, then, it's unfortunate, but that's a part of the business, and we're still building a team, and that's important to keep in mind. No. Nope. Nope. Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, I mean, we have a lot of options. Yeah, we have a lot of options. Yeah. Yeah, I would love to have them both back. Yeah, I think they work well with each other. Their entire careers in the NFL, they've been together. I do think they complement each other well, and we're trying to. We've had again productive conversations with both the representatives, and again the goal is to hopefully get something done. Mm-hmm. Uh, no, I mean, I think in the negotiations, you take all that into account, or you wouldn't approach the player on a contract extension. So, yeah, I mean, Walter Payton, Man of the Year. I love that about him. But you also got to look at production, durability, games played, production versus other comps throughout the league, and that's usually where they land from a financial standpoint. And again, we.
So just to wrap up what he said there. I mean, Shane's basically saying basically what he said all along regarding both Barkley and Jones. He'd like to have them both back in a perfect situation. They're willing to use the tag if they absolutely have to. He's going to later talk about the tag, and I thought this was more interesting because I never really saw him talk about the tag in this light. As you see this video go along, and it's something that I've said during the offseason why ideally I do not want Daniel Jones tagged, and he kind of explains why that may be later on. So I don't think that's the goal, but we'll see how it all plays out during the contract status. But yeah, he's basically saying we're not going to get pushed around. He's going to continue to say that throughout this press conference. And when asked specifically about Saquon Barkley, when they say, do you value other things off the field, it at least seems like he's kind of trying to downplay that a bit, which is exactly what he should do as a general manager. You don't want him to go above and beyond and say how great of a guy Saquon Barkley is, further pressuring himself into committing to Saquon Barkley for a price he may not want to sign him for. So he understands this is a negotiation. This is a game that is being played by both sides. So he's not over committing in terms of his love for Saquon Barkley, as he shouldn't. I think it's a sign of a good GM.
You got to draw a line in the sand. Like, we're not going any further. And if it goes past this, all right, let's shift to plan B. And again, hopefully we don't get to that, but we went through all those plans. No, I don't think so. We're going to try to get Daniel done. Again, we wouldn't be in this situation and negotiating with Daniel if we didn't want him to be our quarterback.
Mm-hmm. So real quick before he answers the rest, I mean, right there he was asked about in terms of the plan, if they have to tag Jones or not, could that affect the team? I think they were asking about the specifics and the approach that they're going to take. And he was pretty direct when talking about Daniel Jones. He didn't seem as direct when talking about Saquon Barkley. He said we wouldn't be this far in the negotiations if we didn't want Daniel Jones to be our quarterback going forward, at least for the foreseeable future. So pretty direct there, and he even gets more direct as this keeps going.
Yeah, that's the unfortunate part of this business because, it was a special season last year. It was Dave's and I's first year, and we did become close with a lot of the players, and they all worked hard. We had very good team chemistry, from day one when we got in there in the off-season program. So you appreciate the hard work that they put in every day. You appreciate the guys playing through injury, putting in the extra to execute the assignments. So there is a personal, part of this, and there's a business side. So, I mean, there may be some players that we don't, get back because of financial reasons, or we couldn't agree on something. But that definitely doesn't change the way we think about them, or, the love and respect that we have for those guys. Yeah, it was an ongoing process. Again, we evaluated every game that he played all the way up until, through the playoffs. And, again, I think we felt good at the end of the season that, he's the guy that we'd like to bring back moving forward and be our guy.
He's, of course, talking about Daniel Jones there when talking about I think the guy that asked him at what point did you realize that you wanted to bring Daniel Jones back, and he said it was kind of an evaluation over the entire season, all the way up and through the playoffs. And he said he's our guy. We want to have him back. I mean, I don't know what else he's got to say to you for people that still doubt whether or not he's going to be the quarterback in 2023. The question is after that, but let's just keep listening.
Yeah, no, we haven't totally bridged. We're a little bit closer. There's still a gap, or we'd have him done. So yeah, we'll still work through that. And again, he's we're working with Rock Nation and Kim, his agent, and have a great relationship with her. And I have had for a long time. So we've had really good communication, and she does a great job. And we'll see if we can bridge the gap here at some point.
So there, just in case you don't know, he's talking about Saquon Barkley. Saquon Barkley's representatives, of course, with Rock Nation. That's at least some positive news on that front. If you want Saquon Barkley back, it seems like Barkley's come closer to what the New York Giants reportedly were willing to give him, which by all accounts was around $12 to $12.5 million a year. He says he basically went on to say that they've bridged the gap closer than where they were, but there's still more work to be done. I think it's going to come down to guaranteed money with Saquon. I don't think Schoen is going to budge off that $12.5 million mark, nor should he, with where this team currently is, in my opinion. But if they're willing to give him a little bit more guaranteed money, maybe the negotiation works that way, and maybe they're able to convince Saquon Barkley to come back here for a little bit less than what he may get out on the open market to come back and play, for a team that he's familiar with, comfortable with, an organization that he loves playing for. So at least, it seemed at least somewhat encouraging that, the possibility of Saquon Barkley coming back as a New York Giant is still, alive and well. So we'll see how it all plays out. We got a couple more weeks.
I can't tell you that. Then they know. We're gonna try to bridge the gap. Yeah, I can't tell you. I can't give it all away. Yeah, I think Isaiah came in, and he's a guy we drafted when we were in Buffalo, and we're familiar with him. Smart, tough, dependable, good worker. He knew the offense. He came in. He could play 4 spots, and he went out and performed the way we thought he would. So yeah, that was an important piece. That was an important pickup. Again, great job by the pro department identifying him when he became available, and the timing was right, and he did a heck of a job for us. So yeah, it was important. Yeah, all avenues. Again, like we had a good season. We still have several holes on both sides of the ball, so we still have a ways to go and several holes to fill. So I understand there's somewhat of a obsession with the receiver position, and again, like we still have to build a team. Like that's an important position. I get that, but the value has to match up, and we still have several other holes that we need to fill. 2024, we have some guys. You got to look down the road. Who's up next year? What's coming down the pipeline as you build the team, not just for 2023, but down the road.
Yeah, that's the one thing, and we're going to keep listening, obviously, but that's the one thing I take out of this press conference is Joe Schoen continues to drive home that this is not going to just be a one-year fix. They're not going to be able to just fix all the holes on this team this offseason, which is even more of a reason why I don't, if he's bringing Jones back, especially if it's on a multi-year deal, I think it's to build around him, at least for the foreseeable future, for the next 2 or 3 years. If we sign him to a 4 or 5 year extension, I don't think he's going to view it as just a 1-year sample size, especially the way that he talks about the wide receiver position. He says that, yeah, he understands that people have been obsessing over that. It's an obvious need, but you got to look down the road, and it may be a better option to heavily pursue that position next year based off of the wide receivers that he sees coming out of the drafts, the potential free agency, so on and so forth. So he's going to go for BPA, and he's going to build this team up accordingly. And I think that's the right way for him to approach this, or any general manager to approach it. Rome wasn't built in a day, especially when you inherit a situation like Schoen did. And he's looking at this as a multi-year process and not a 1-year fix. So love hearing that.
Yeah, this week will be a big. I mean, all the UFAs, and then anybody like Dexter, Joel Siegel's his agent. We've had conversations with him. That's a little bit trickier, the DT market, when you look at the gap in between the highest paid and then the next guy. So, but Dexter's great, leader, great player, did a good job for us this year. So he's definitely somebody that we'll talk to, and I'd like to have him here for a long time. Yeah, I mean, we'll see if it comes to that. We're hoping we don't get to where it's one or the other. It doesn't have to be that way. If it did, we wouldn't be in, have contract offers out to both of them. So it's not necessarily we have to. One's getting tagged. Ideally, that doesn't happen, and you get them both done. That's going to be better for the organization, and I think it'll be better for Daniel, and I think it'll be better for Saquon.
So right there, and he's going to talk about it a little bit more. First off, he says he'd like to have both back, but he said that all along, and any GM is going to say that, and I'm sure he would. But the question is it realistic to get both of them back? Is what he's willing to go to, is that a realistic price point for Saquon Barkley or for Daniel Jones? So that remains to be seen. He talks about how he could use the tag, but then he says ideally he thinks it would be in the organizations were not their best interest to use the tag on either player or for the players themselves. And it's obvious as to why. It's because of the salary cap implications and not being able to build yourself up this year to be able to get the best possible team for 2023, but also potentially hurting your team for 2024, especially if you have to tag Daniel Jones. The other players that you are going to sign, you're going to have to structure the contracts in a way that they're going to affect 2024 more so than they would if you could spread that contract out accordingly if you're able to sign him to an extension. I think that's what he's talking about there. So if you're leaning towards what he wants to do, and he's going to go further into talking about it, I think ideally, even if they tag Jones, they're going to want to sign him to an extension to give themselves the cap flexibility. But let's keep listening.
If we can get deals done without having to use the franchise tag. It does. Yeah, it does. And that's something everybody realizes. I don't think the franchise, if you have to franchise Daniel, I don't think that's best for the organization. I don't believe it's best for Daniel, especially as we try to build the team around him and, questions about receiver and, other positions on the other side of the ball where we may need depth. So it does hurt you a little bit in terms of, the team building process, but, we're prepared if that's a scenario that we're faced with, and we have a plan B, and we'll try to execute that best we can. Yeah, I don't want to get into specifics of the negotiations, but we're prepared if we have to, to go down that avenue. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, that's a great point. Daniel did have a good year, and he'll be the first to tell you, like, there's still a lot of meat left on the bone and room for improvement. And Dabes will tell you that. The coaching staff will tell you that. Like, he came a long way. He's still 25, and again, I still think there's room for improvement. As he continues to mature and be around the staff. I think the continuity of the staff, getting Kafka back. Shea interviewed for a coordinator job, but getting those guys back, our entire offensive staff will be back except for Tony Sperano, Jr., the assistant O-line coach. But, same with the defense, the entire defensive staff's coming back. So I think continuity, year two, familiarity with the system will be that much further ahead as we go into the all-season program. And I think everybody will benefit from that, especially Daniel. Yeah. Yeah. Amen. Yeah. Moving forward, how important is the draft itself? Yeah. Can you bide your time between contract negotiations? Guys, you may want to bring that. Yeah. Yeah, no, that's a great question, Art. And I'm still trying to feel my way through it. Like, this was the first in season as a general manager. So, at this time, normally I have fourth round and above. I've seen all the free agents. As an assistant GM, you've got time where you're uninterrupted in your office where, so I'm still catching up on that stuff. I have a great staff. Obviously, negotiations take part of your time, coaches' contracts. So there's a lot of other things that are pulling me away from the film, but I'm in a good spot. Again, I have a good staff that leads me in the right direction and kind of filters the information to who I need to look at. But we're going to have to build through the draft, especially, financially, if you have to use the franchise tag or whatever, like, we're still going to have to build through the draft and, have those young cost controlled players over 4 years. It's going to be important to have those players that can contribute. And
that's exactly what you want to hear if you're a fan of the Giants. I mean, that's exactly what you want to hear. I know a lot of fans want the quick fixes. Quick fixes don't win you championships. You got to build a foundation before you start looking for those premium pieces in free agency. And that's exactly what you want to hear. And that's why, I've thought all along that, when people say, oh, it's going to affect the cap if you have to sign Jones but no, they're going to be building through the draft. And then that's what he's saying here. This team needs to build through the draft. That's how you win Super Bowls, getting guys on cost-effective salaries for 4 years, building up your foundation, and improving this overall football team. So don't expect the New York Giants to go out there and spend a ton of money in free agency. I've said that now for months, and Shane's basically saying that here. Um, yes, they're going to sign free agents. It's a 53-man roster. You have to fill holes, but don't expect them to sign top of the market guys. Nor should they. They got to build this team up through the draft, and these next 2 drafts for Joe Schoen are imperative if we want this team to get on the level of the Philadelphia Eagles by that amount of time. These not just these next 2 drafts, the previous draft, those players are going to need to mature, right? The guys like Thibodeau and Flott and Wandale Robinson. That's going to be the core of this team, and that's if this team's going to become great, these first 2 or 3 draft classes for Joe Schoen are going to be the main driving force behind it.
Our class did a good job this year. I think we're 4th or 5th in rookie play time, so a lot of valuable experience, from the rookies and some guys coming back from injuries that we'll be expecting big year 2s from. Yeah, Kayvon was again, he was injured in the preseason, and then slowly kind of came on once he became more familiar with the system and was healthy. So I was pleased with Kayvon. Leadership in the locker room. You guys have been around him. His personality, he's got a big personality. So his work ethic and the way he's wired, I expect him to continue to ascend. But he was everything we thought he'd be his rookie year. Yeah, I think we made a concerted effort. I think last year when I stood up here, we had 5 healthy offensive linemen maybe or something like that. We have 14 under contract, I think, next year. Majority of those guys have started NFL games. McKeithen hasn't, but, from Azudu to Jack Anderson, Tyree Phillips, we have really good depth. It won't prevent us from, if there's a guy out there in the interior that we would want to sign, from doing that. But I think we have some pieces there. Gawinski's at right guard, but center and left guard, it's going to be good competition this offseason. Yeah, I think it's important to evaluate the physical traits, but then there's also, to me, that position's in a total different stratosphere, because you have to evaluate the person, how they learn, their instincts, how they process information. Like, to me, that's way more important than, like, you can watch the film and see one thing, but the makeup of the kid, I think, is way more important. And it mirrors up, I think that's when you got a good quarterback. Coach Davis. Yeah, it's funny because in 2019 we signed into our practice squad in Buffalo, and he was unique that he would be upstairs hanging with the personnel department. He would do he was already coaching at the time. Basically, he would take the practice squad guys down there, show them the film. He'd play safety at, I don't know if people know this, but he'd play safety in Buffalo to give looks for Josh, as a scout team guy. He was already coaching. Super smart. I think that's why he was able to go out and execute the way he did in the Eagles game. But I love Davis, great guy. Couldn't be happier for him. He's going to be a hell of a coach, and even a better person. So, yeah, we've known he's going to be a coach for a while, though.
How do you feel about your defensive line? For your players.
Yeah.
How do you feel about your depth of that?
Yeah, not great. And that's a premium position. Again, there's, talk about allocating resources to positions. It's important. We got to be better next year stopping the run. And, I think some of that is our depth, where Dexter doesn't have to play the amount of snaps he has to play, or, Leo doesn't have to be out there.
So there's a hint. Not that you needed a hint if you were a Giants fan watching this team this year, guard against the run, but, he was asked about the defensive line and how he feels about the overall unit, and he said, not good. So what does that tell you? Well, expect the New York Giants to go out there and potentially draft a defensive lineman this year. Run stuffer specifically. He goes straight into talking about run defense, which was the Achilles heel of this defense this year, whether it be the linebacking core or whether it be the interior defensive line. And I didn't pull up the video clip of the other Q&A that he had, but he talked about the linebacking core there. So that definitely, and as you would think, is going to be a focal point for Shane this offseason.
As much as he was out there. So, yeah, it's important, not just there, but across the board. We need to improve the depth on both sides of the ball.
Hey, Joe, how much did your time with Brandon in Buffalo shape your first season on the job?
A lot. I would have been swimming if it wasn't for Brandon. So I was fortunate that, he put me in his hip pocket, for my entire time there. And again, he came up, kind of the football operations early on before he shifted into the evaluation and the scouting. So he had a different perspective for 15 or so years of running an organization and being a leader across all facets. So whether it's right now contract negotiations, a lot of times people want to, the GM that, their team drafts the best. There's so much more to the job that I would have no idea about if it wasn't for Brandon. So, I think I reflect a lot back to 2017 when we were in Buffalo, some of the waiver wire claims, Isaiah McKenzie's still there, but guys like that, where you could, I said at my opening press conference, compete today and build for tomorrow. The way to acquire players, even in 18, when we had 50 million in dead cap space, like how to acquire players and still be competitive roster when maybe you're a little bit hamstrung in terms of some of the resources. So that was all things I took forward, to this year. And, some of it paid off with some of the waiver wire claims and guys that we were able to get.
Speaking of that waiver wire, claim, when you come back into that Bills pool with a fuckload of free agents.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see. I don't know how much money we're going to have at the end of it with some of our own. But, yeah, I mean, there's a comfort level with, if you're paying a certain amount of money for players and, you're going to invest them, that you already have some background information. That's not Buffalo. That could be Mark Glowinski last year we signed from Indianapolis. Well, Bobby Johnson had coached him. So there's some familiarity. You're not putting a large chunk of money into an unknown commodity, as important as football character and personal character is to our organization. Yeah. Yeah, Dave's is great about that. Again, he wants guys that can separate. If you can separate, no matter how tall, short, wide, whatever it may be, if you can separate. And as a quarterback, you prefer that. You'd rather throw to a guy that's open versus a guy that's, being covered by a DB. So, if they can separate, again, we'll find a way to utilize them within the offense, whether it's outside or inside the slot. But I think that's one of the unique skills that Dave has is.
All right, that's going to wrap it up. There's 15 seconds left in the video. His last question there, he was asked about seemingly, how they prioritize their evaluation of wide receivers, what they're looking for. And he basically went on to say, and I saw it in the other Q&A as well, he was asked a similar question. He basically went on to say that height is not, necessarily a priority for them when evaluating the wide receiver position. The most important attribute for them is their ability to create separation, which as Giants fans, we know over the last 4 or 5 years how important that is because our wide receivers don't create any of it. So you have to figure that, those are the types of wide receivers that the New York Giants are probably going to be looking at in this year's draft class, potentially free agency, guys that could create quick separation. It's probably what they saw in Wan'Dale Robinson, right, where he talks about how size doesn't really matter. He wants guys that could get off the line of scrimmage quick and help out the quarterback and give him an easy read, right away. So a guy like Zay Flowers, for example, was the first guy I thought about when he said that. If we're going wide receiver, good route runner, guy that seemingly is pretty good in terms of creating quick separation, not the tallest of guys, right? But it seems like that may be the type of wide receiver they're looking for. Of course, they probably want the best of all worlds. If you get a guy that's 6'2", that, is shifty and can create quick separation, is a really good route runner, of course. But those are the types of wide receivers they're probably going to be looking for. And he went in the other interview, we talked about Tyreek Hill specifically and how height doesn't really matter. If you're quick, you're a good route runner, and you can create separation. So that's a good thing. I think those are the types of wide receivers that'll fit this offense very well. And we'll see how they go about doing it during the offseason as they try to fill out the roster. But just wanted to give you guys a reaction. I know the video was a bit longer, but it was a 17-minute press conference. Very important press conference today from Joe Schoen. Obviously, at least half of it centered around both Saquon Barkley and Daniel Jones. And it just gives me further confidence that Jones is absolutely coming back. There was a couple of new tidbits from that regarding Jones where he talked specifically about the franchise tag and how he basically said that's not something that we want to do, ideally. And it's not something that they should want to do. So even if they end up franchise tagging Daniel Jones, as I've said all along, I think the goal is going to be to get him to sign to an extension. And I think it'd be in Daniel Jones' best interest to sign to an extension. Listen, at the end of the day, $32 million is great. If you get hurt, you may never get another starting contract again, right? You're gambling at that point. So I think it's in Jones' best interest to take as much long-term security as he could possibly get. And we'll see if they can come to a fair agreement, which will allow Joe Schoen more of an opportunity to build this team properly over the next 2 years. If you don't have to franchise tag Daniel Jones and potentially backload some salaries of free agents that you bring on this year's roster. The Barkley thing, at least it left me a little bit more confident that, yeah, maybe he will be back. Maybe he's willing to meet Joe Schoen at that price if we could guarantee him a bit more money. And that'd be great to bring back the two leaders of the offense, guys that are obviously very respected in the locker room. I'd love to have both those guys back. Golladay, good luck wherever you end up. I'm happy you're no longer a New York Giant. No offense to him, but it was time to part ways, right? That $7 million could go a long way, and he wasn't getting the job done here. I don't think he fit the scheme. He gave us everything he had last year, which unfortunately wasn't a whole lot. So we'll see how the New York Giants try to retool this wide receiving core over the next couple of months. And we should get our answer shortly. I'll probably go live in 2 days with the New York Giants. I want to do like a live hangout maybe on Thursday with you guys. Hopefully there's a bit more to talk about. Hopefully some new things coming out. Maybe we get some more rumors. Regardless, super excited to talk about it with you guys if you guys made it through the video. As always, if you liked what you watched, please subscribe. Drop a comment. Maybe give me a little thumbs up. Cheers.